This is the Right Now podcast with Sarah Werner, episode 49, What I Learned from Writing a Book in 1 Week. Welcome to Right Now, the podcast that helps aspiring writers to find the time, energy, and courage you need to pursue your passion and to write every day. I'm your host, Sarah Werner, and I think it's been approximately 1 billion years since I spoke to you last. This might sound like an exaggeration or a hyperbole, as we call it in the literary world, but really, it's not, or at least it feels like it's not. When I started this podcast, I committed to releasing a new episode every Monday. And let's face it, it's been a long time since I've held true to that promise. Now, of course, I have all of the excuses in the world. And if you're subscribed to my email newsletter, you might know a few of these things. This fall, I signed a contract to write for Forbes, which was kind of a dream come true, to be honest. I'm very excited about it, but I was doing that then on top of my 40-hour-a-week full-time job for a marketing agency, and in addition to my church presidency, and in addition to trying to work on my novel, and in addition to being a good family member and a good friend. I feel like I was in this weird place because a lot of really good things happened in 2016, but there were a lot of them. I feel like the worst person in the world, like I'm complaining about all these wonderful things that I'm involved in. But if I'm being realistic, it didn't leave me a lot of room to prioritize my podcast. And if I continue to be honest, this is what matters to me. This is where it all started. This is what I want to be doing. 2016 also had a couple of less than wonderful things that it sort of bonked me over the head with. But I won't dwell on those here. Basically, what I want to tell you today is that I'm sorry I let you down, and I am really excited about 2017. You know how sometimes people renew their wedding vows? I am going to renew my vow to you to come out with a new Right Now podcast episode every Monday. It felt good to say that. Now, I am very grateful not only for your patience, but for the sheer amount of coffee break episodes I had built up that I could rely on when I wasn't podcasting, when I wasn't doing my monologue show here. And I don't know, maybe you like those better. Maybe those are better. But then I don't get to talk to you. And I love talking to you. If you're just tuning into the show, Coffee Break is my sister podcast to the Right Now podcast, and that's where I interview awesome writers and authors and wordsmiths and all of the other people who work with words and creativity for a living. And so I relied very heavily on my stockpile of Coffee Break episodes during my unexpected, unplanned, and really unwanted Right Now podcast hiatus. So one of the things from 2016 that I was busy doing with my time was ghostwriting, which I love to do, actually. I love ghostwriting. I love putting words to someone else's ideas and really seeing those ideas come alive. I wrote, I want to say 3 books and several articles and all sorts of other stuff. But those 3 books, one of those books, I wrote within the span of 1 week. And that's really what I'm going to spend this show talking about with you today is the lessons that I learned while under the pressure of writing a book in 1 week. I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about writing. And I think that some of these lessons that I learned will benefit you in your writing journey. So let's get started. So as I said earlier, I do ghostwriting on the side, in addition to the many, many other things that I do on the side. And I agreed to a rush job, which was, hey, we really need to get this book out to the publisher. Some nebulous things happened. Can you step in and take care of this and write this book in 1 week? It wasn't like a, 700,000 word tome. It was a 48,000 word book, if memory serves, and it was nonfiction. The outline was already done-ish. And so I said, yeah, I love a challenge because I have many, many problems in my brain. I would love to take this on. So I did, and here's what I did. I got up every morning at 4:30. I found a coffee house that opened at 5 a.m. every morning. And so I was at this coffee shop at 5, and I would write until I had to leave for work, probably about 7:45, and then I would drive to work. I live in a small-ish town, so everything is reasonably close to everything else. So there's no 40-minute commutes or anything. So I'd jaunt over to my day job and I would work. And then after work, I would go back to the coffee house, grabbing dinner on the way, and I would write as late as they stayed open. So I really had 2 writing shifts every day, and I was drinking a lot of coffee. And the book was a technical book, which I actually kind of appreciated. I don't know if I would have been able to do this if the book had not been about a subject matter that I felt comfortable writing about already. So I feel like that's a caveat. The book was about something technical that I deal with pretty much on a daily basis. And so I was able to fill in the gaps without having to ask the author a lot of questions. And so that was really helpful, I think. So here are the 10 lessons that I learned from writing a book in 1 week. Number 1, this will not come as a surprise to you. Writing is work. I don't know why this surprised me, but it did. I think that for me, I have this weird perception of how time works and how space works and how my brain works. And what I mean by that is I saw the problem in front of me, which was, you have to write 48,000 words in 5 to 6 days. I understood the problem. And in my mind, I said, I am capable of doing this. I understand everything that's in front of me. And at that point, I had mentally solved the problem, which is what I spend my day job doing. I solve problems using my brain. And this was different because even though I comprehended and understood and had come to terms with the problem in my brain, I then had to put down 48,000 words on paper. Well, technically on my laptop, and churning out those 48,000 words was a bit of a grind. And it reminded me of how spoiled I am. Because when I write for my novel, when I write for Forbes, when I write for myself, I'm using writing not only as a tool for communication, but as a means for understanding my own thoughts. So it's kind of indulgent. It's very selfish, and I'm getting something out of it as I do it. I'm using it as a processor, if you will, for my own thoughts. But as I sat here and wrote from an outline somebody else's ideas that somebody else created in this very, very short period of time, in a high period of productivity, it hit me over the head that even though I knew what the paragraph needed to say, I still needed to spit the words out to say it. And that was very hard work. It was not necessarily difficult. I was in a cushy little coffee house sipping a mocha with whipped cream on it. It was amazing. And I was very comfortable. I was probably I wasn't wearing sweatpants because I would have to go to work after that. But I wasn't exactly in the coal mines. I wasn't pouring concrete or breaking rocks. I was writing. But I kind of felt like I was breaking rocks and pouring concrete. There's a tedium sometimes to writing. And what got me through was a couple things. A, I couldn't give up because I had a deadline. I was being paid to do this. I needed to just get it done. But number 2, I loved scrolling back up in my long Google document that I was creating and seeing how many freaking words I had written. It was amazing. It felt so good to see what I had accomplished. What do they say? Hard work is its own reward, I guess. I don't know if that's true, but writing definitely was work. And you know what? Even when I am enjoying it, even when I'm writing for myself, it's still work. It's just work that I get something out of. It's work that I enjoy. It really bothers me when people say oh, you're a writer? Well, that must be fun. Some of us have real jobs. If you've ever written anything, you know that writing is hard work. Unfortunately, it took me, 34 years to learn that. Number 2, Again, this might not come as a giant surprise to you, but it was a lesson that I had to learn. And this is that writing not only takes work, writing takes time. Time is real, and time is a limiting factor. I was squeezing in a 48,000-word book amidst my 40-hour-a-week job, which breaks down to 8 hours a day. All of my other life duties, eating food, taking a shower every once in a while, being with my family. And I was in this place for a while where time just became this. I felt like I was watching grains of sand go through an hourglass. And I felt that when all the sand had gone through, I would be left suffocating. I would be, I don't know, it's hard to describe it. But I thought a lot about time that week and how we use our time and what we use our time for. And thinking back on it now, it astonished me the number of words that I could produce in 1 hour when my mind was really, really focused. And now today, when I'm not under all of this pressure to produce, how easily an hour slips away unnoticed. I've really started looking at my time differently. And I don't know if this is altogether healthy. I feel like there's an element of balance that I'm missing because if you ask my husband, he'll say, "Oh, Sarah, you're always working. You never have fun anymore. You never sit down and play video games or binge watch anything on Netflix." And part of me is still remembering how precious every hour was as I was working on writing this book. And why would I binge watch 3, 1-hour TV shows in a row when I could write for 3 hours and produce something that I'm really proud of? Again, this is probably not a super healthy mindset. And I know one of the main tenets of this podcast is that you can find work, life, and writing balance. So I think I'd like to retain the lesson of how precious our time is while reminding myself, or while remembering, that life is an important part of that three-way balance as well. Number 3, the third lesson that I learned is about strategy. The absolute best strategy that you can use to write and to be productive while you are writing is to put your butt in that seat and write. And I think when I talk about the butt in seat strategy, what I'm talking about is commitment. I needed to commit every day, twice a day, to putting my butt in that seat and getting the words written. It was the first time in a long time that I had written every day. And I realized that while I was writing every day, the writing was easier each day. When you live something, when you do something every day like that, and when you commit to creating something and getting your butt in that seat every day, you become more a part of the project that you're working on. It sounds kind of hokey or new agey, but I really found it was true. That as I wrote, the writing became easier, more natural. It flowed better. I understood my subject better. It was just a better experience. Number 4, you can and probably will get burned out. I know that a lot of us do a lot of work. You write, you work, you maybe have a family or people who count or depend on you. Maybe you're a student. Maybe you volunteer at your church or in your community. There's a word for people like us, or rather a phrase. And that phrase is burning the candle at both ends. Sure, it burns brighter and it produces more light and more heat and more energy. And you're like, wow, look at that wonderful candle that's burning on both ends. But then the 2 points of flame meet in the middle, and suddenly there is no more candle. There is no more wick. The candle has burned out, and there simply is no more. When I got to about probably the 3rd or the 4th day of writing this book in 1 week, I got to a point where my brain felt that way. Like there just simply was no more. The words that came out were just not good anymore. Maybe they weren't even words at this point. I felt like I had given and I just had no more to give. My brain was incapable of thinking. I think maybe I could have construed a sentence like, see the dog run, but that might have even been a little bit of a stretch. This feeling, I call this being burned out. You've maybe felt this before when you're cramming for an exam, or if you volunteered for something and got in way over your head, and then when the whole thing was over, decided that you weren't going to volunteer anymore because you were just done. That's burned out. And when it comes to being burned out, there's two things you can do. The first thing is you can try to prevent it, or at least push it further down the road, by taking frequent breaks. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but I think I actually produced more when I was incorporating regular breaks into my writing. So I downloaded this handy little app called Tide, which works using the Pomodoro technique, where you work hard for a set amount of time, so 25 minutes, 45 minutes, what have you, and then you take a break, a 5-minute break, a 15-minute break, whatever's proportional to how long you've worked. Eventually, I got into a rhythm where I would work for 45 minutes and then take a 10 to 15-minute break to stretch my legs, order another cup of coffee, use the restroom, what have you. And by giving my brain a chance to rest every once in a while, I feel like I got burned out a little bit less than I could have. The second thing you can do is when you do feel burned out, when you realize you are just at the very end and your eyes are just bloodshot and your brain is just skipping gears and everything is just terrible and you are incapable of producing any more ideas, stop what you're doing, take care of yourself. I say this because I tried to push through the burnout. Instead of calling it a day, I went back up to the counter at the coffee house and I ordered something with way too much espresso in it. And then I sat down and tried to commit myself, despite the burnout, chugging my caffeine, I tried to produce. And it just was not good. My brain was done for the day, but I didn't respect that fact. And the stuff that I wrote was just not good, and I had to rewrite it the next day. What I should have done was said, okay, my brain is officially done for today. I'm going to go home, put on some sweatpants, eat some ice cream, or, something healthy that's not ice cream, and read a book for fun or watch an episode of X, Y, or Z show that I'm watching, and cover myself in blankets and hug my cat. And, maybe have a glass of wine. I don't know. But the point is, you're not a machine, even though you might feel like one sometimes. Your body is a very delicate ecosystem, and you need to be kind to it. The fifth lesson I learned while writing a book in 1 week was that there is no time to edit while you write. You just need to focus on getting the words down. There is not time to sit and fiddle with one phrase and to think about themes and to do research into whether or not you're using this word correctly, or to use a thesaurus to try to change up your vocabulary. Do not spend valuable writing time polishing and editing. Because what I learned after I wrote this book in 1 week, that it doesn't end there. The book doesn't go straight from first draft to publisher. Very few things from that rough first draft make it into the published version of the book. So just sit down and write your first draft. Don't worry about phrasing, don't worry about timing, don't even worry about spelling. Yes, you heard me correctly. Just get the words out. You can always make them more beautiful once they're there. You can always go back and edit. You can always go back and research something. But it is a much better use of your time and your energy just to get the words out there into your first draft. Get that first draft done. I remember I spent probably 15 or 20 minutes dithering over this sentence, and eventually I realized, you know what? This is not the best use of my time. This is probably one of the most valuable lessons that I learned in writing this nonfiction book that I plan on applying to my fictional novel. Because when I sit down to write my fictional novel, I spend a year going over a sentence and making sure that it's perfect and beautiful, and I don't even think that later that sentence might get chopped. Do not polish while you write. Write the rough draft and then go back and edit and polish as much as you like. Number 6, don't overcommit yourself. I learned this lesson because I overcommitted myself. There are 24 hours in a day. You need time to sleep and to eat. You need to spend time with your family. You need to spend time at your full-time job. Like I said in point number 2, time is very real and very limiting. If you commit yourself to more than 24 hours of work within a 24-hour period, you're not going to get it all done, no matter how ambitious or optimistic you are. I overcommitted myself. And as a result of that, I canceled a coffee date with a dear friend during the week of this book writing. I skipped church. I severely neglected my family. I sacrificed sleep. I did not eat healthfully because I was getting fast food for pretty much every meal. I did not go to the gym. Be reasonable. Look at your calendar. Make sure you have time to do all of the things that you want and need to do in your day. The 7th lesson that I learned was how wonderful it is to work from an outline. This was new for me. If you've hung out at all in the literary world, you'll know that there's a few different kinds of writers, and they separate themselves into a few different camps. So you have people who plan, so the planners, people who maybe create an outline before writing or, have their 7-book epic fantasy series planned out through the very end. But then you have the pantsers, the people who sort of fly by the seat of their pants, and when they sit down to write, they don't know how long they're going to be writing for or even necessarily what they're going to be writing about. I am a pantser, and I've always said, why would I want to create an outline when I get all of my best ideas for writing while I'm writing? Why would I want to create an outline when my favorite part of writing is when I surprise myself? Well, I learned during this week of writing a book how wonderful an outline can be. I would have never tried it otherwise because, to use a point from earlier in this podcast episode, I got burned out on outlines in school. We had to write 5-paragraph essays throughout high school, and then I had to write 5-page papers throughout college. And for everyone, we had to submit an outline and have the outline approved and blah, blah, blah. And it was always opening paragraph, 3 supporting points, and a concluding paragraph. And I learned to hate outlines. I hated them very much. But if I had not had an outline from which to write this book, it would not have been written, or it would not have been any good. It would not have made any sense. There's something wonderful about seeing an outline and saying, okay, I don't need to talk about everything in the very beginning. I will get to this point here when it says I will get to it, and I will get to this conclusion here, and I can work my way up to it. And it was a great way to pace myself. It was a great way to divvy out good information in a measured way without overloading the reader. It was good to know what order points needed to happen in, and there was enough room within the outline that I was able to still make discoveries along the way. So for one chapter, I had, very similarly to my dreaded high school outlines, an intro paragraph, 3 supporting paragraphs, and a concluding paragraph. But within there, I had the freedom to discover and to learn and to make connections for my readers. And so it was really valuable. So I am applying this to my novel. Very loosely, it's going to be a very small outline, but it's still going to exist. And I don't know, I'll see how it works, and maybe I won't be a pantser anymore, but we'll see. The 8th lesson I learned is that dread is accumulative. What I mean by that is, it's very easy to lay in bed at like 3:30 a.m. worrying about this book that you have to write in 1 week. And often I think our problems become magnified or bigger than they actually are when we worry about them. Because I found when I was sitting with my butt in my seat at the coffee house at 5 a.m., that once I started writing words, once I got a few sentences down on paper or on my screen, the whole thing felt less daunting. I knew I had 48,000 words to write, but I also knew that I could do it. Once you're 1 sentence in, 2 sentences in, 3 sentences in, you begin to remember that you're kind of good at this, that there's a reason you're a writer. It's because you can write things, and you can write them well. So while I dreaded beginning each day, I committed to getting down those first few sentences, paragraphs, words, what have you, And then I would breathe a sigh of relief because I would remember, oh yeah, I can do this. Number 9. Number 9 was that, yeah, I can do this. This is maybe a little bit related to the last one, but realizing that I could write a nonfiction book gave me the confidence I needed to sit down and try writing fiction again. So sometimes if you write something for someone else, and once you remember, oh yeah, I'm a writer, I can do this, you'll have the confidence that you need to move on and write something for yourself. And I realized they're really not that different. Well, I mean, aside from the fact that I was writing a technical manual and my novel is speculative fiction, they're absolutely nothing alike. But words are words, right? I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. Okay. Number 10, deadlines are helpful. I say this because of 2 reasons. Number 1, I was terrified of not making my deadline because I did not want to let the person whom I was writing this book for, I did not want to let them down. So that deadline kept me accountable. I have the feeling that if I hadn't had a deadline and somebody asked me to write a book, it would be 3 years later and I would still be writing that book, off and on, in bits and pieces, maybe trying to multitask. But that deadline made me do it and get it done. And I'm so grateful for that. If you're not good at following up with your own deadlines, maybe have an accountability partner, someone from your writing group, a friend in person, a friend online, someone who's a writer who gets it. Have them hold you accountable. Tell them, hey, I want to finish 3 more chapters of my novel by the end of this month. At the end of the month, will you please ask me if I've done it? I want to be accountable for this. The second thing that the deadline did is it just kept me from slacking. I did not check Facebook. I did not check Twitter. I did not text my siblings like I usually do. My nose was to the grindstone because I had to get these words out in a certain, very limited amount of time. So I did not slack. When I finished my book, when I looked back at the 48,000 words I had written within 1 week, I was astonished. I had not thought that I was actually capable of doing it. So why did I do it in the first place, you ask? Well, what a wonderful question. A, it's because I tend to overcommit. B, it's because I'm blindingly positive and I always have a can-do attitude, even when maybe I can't do what I think I can. But I did it. And it was good, which also surprises me a little bit. And the book is now published, and I have a copy of it on my shelf. And when I look at it, I'm going to remember these 10 lessons that I learned while I was writing it. Number 1, that writing is hard work and often tedious work. Number 2, writing takes time, which is a very real and very limiting element. Number 3, the very best thing you can do is put your butt in your seat and commit to writing. Number 4, to know when you're burned out and what to do when you are. Number 5, that the most important thing you can do right now is just get a rough draft finished. You can always polish and edit it later. Number 6, don't overcommit yourself. There are only a certain number of hours in a day, and you should not be taking on more work than there are hours in the day. Number 7, that outlines can be very helpful. Number 8, that once you get started, you realize that it's not so daunting or scary as you thought it would be. Number 9, that I have the confidence to write my own stuff, and that it's possible to get the confidence that you need to write your own stuff. And number 10, that accountability in the form of a deadline or a commitment to a friend can be invaluable in producing. I hope that these are helpful to you as they were helpful to me. Since I wrote that book, I've recommitted to working on my novel, and I feel like a big weight has been lifted off of my heart. I feel a freedom that I didn't feel before, a freedom to create and not to bog myself down in the details. A freedom to be a writer with a capital W and not worry about filling my time on Facebook and Twitter or on rewatching old episodes of The X-Files. I'm curious to know what lessons you've learned in writing. I would love to hear your thoughts, your comments. If you're interested in responding, you can contact me in a couple different ways. First and foremost, you can leave a comment on the show notes for today's episode number 49, which you can find at sarahwerner.com. That's SARAHWERNER.com. You can also send me an email at hello@sarahwerner.com. Or while you're on my website, you can navigate over to the Contact tab and send me a note that way. So I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear about any lessons that you've learned while writing that have just been surprising or invaluable to you, or that maybe have struck you in a new way. I would also like to encourage you to sign up for my email newsletter. It's a great way to know when I've released a new episode if you're not subscribed. And hey, speaking of that, I would love it if you would subscribe to my show. You can do it on iTunes by clicking subscribe. You can do it on pretty much any podcatching app, whether you're using Overcast, iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, what have you. Click subscribe. You'll get my episodes automatically when they come out, which is the magic of podcasting. I'm really grateful that I get the opportunity to speak to you. And so I want to say thank you for listening. It's so important for me that I can connect with you and talk to you about writing. I think that this is such a wonderful, wonderful thing. I love podcasting, and I hope that you've enjoyed my show thus far. There's a lot of great stuff to come this year. I would also like to thank my Patreon supporters. Patreon is a secure third-party donation platform where people can give 50 cents an episode, $1 an episode, $3 an episode, $900 an episode, whatever you feel like this is worth to you. I greatly appreciate it. There's several different donation levels, which I encourage you to scope out at patreon.com. That's patreon.com. You can just search for the Right Now podcast. There should also be a link to it in today's show notes. What this does is it helps me keep podcasting. It pays for media hosting, it pays for equipment, all of that good stuff. So I would really appreciate your donation. If you decide that this is something you'd like to do, you would be joining the ranks of wonderful Patreon supporters such as Official Cool Cats Rebecca Werner and Sean Locke, Official Bookworm Matthew Paulson, Official Rad Dudes Andrew Coons and the Sioux Empire Podcast, Official Caffeine Enablers Paul Sading and Colleen Catalesa, as well as several other donors who wish to remain anonymous. You are all just so wonderful. Seriously, I would not be able to do this without you. Thank you so much. Again, if you're interested in becoming one of these wonderful donors, you can go out to patreon.com, that's patreon.com, and search for the Right Now podcast. Otherwise, there should be a link to it in the show notes for today's episode at sarahwerner.com. 2017 is going to be a good year. I'm not just saying that because 2016 was such an awful year. I'm saying it because we're going to do some wonderful things together. We're going to write. We're going to accomplish things. We're going to finish what we start. We're going to commit to that butt in seat strategy. And we're going to try to write every day. This has been episode 49 of the Right Now podcast, the podcast that helps aspiring writers to find the time, energy, and courage you need to pursue your passion and write every day. I'm Sarah Werner, and I want to help you finish what you've started.